Welcome to the debate. Today we're turning our eyes toward the Kingdom of Thailand to dissect a resume that, quite frankly, shouldn't really exist in the modern era of sports.
Yeah, we're looking at a fighter who didn't just dominate a division. He basically held it hostage for over a decade.
Right. We are talking about the Thai flyweight legend, Pongsaklek Wonjongkam.
A name that is absolute royalty in Bangkok, a cult hero among the diehards in Tokyo, and yet somehow a complete ghost in Canastota, New York, where the International Boxing Hall of Fame resides.
And that is the central friction we need to resolve today. Because we have a man with a division record 17 consecutive title defenses, a 55 height winning streak, 2 distinct reigns as the lineal champion, and yet, years after becoming eligible, he is still waiting on the outside looking in.
It's a baffling omission on the surface, but one that becomes clearer, though no less frustrating, when you peel back the layers of geography and boxing politics.
So, establishing our sides here, my position on this is rigid. I represent the stance that the statistical dominance and sheer longevity of Wonjongkam make him a mathematical lock for the Hall. His exclusion is a failure of the voting body to recognize objective, quantified greatness.
And I represent the perspective that while your raw numbers look staggering on paper, they actually give his critics ammunition. My argument is that his true case requires a deeper contextual analysis. We need to dismiss the padded record and look at who he beat and how he overcame the systemic bias against lower-weight Asian fighters. His quality, not his quantity, is the real argument.
Let's open up those position statements because I really want to drill down on this idea of historical anomaly. When we talk about the Hall of Fame, we are usually talking about the best of the best, right? The outliers. Pongsaklek Wonjongkam is a definition of a statistical outlier. We are talking about a fighter who went undefeated from July 1996 to July 2007. That is 11 years without a loss. In the modern era, where promoters protect their assets and fighters maybe fight twice a year if we're lucky, that kind of consistency is almost impossible to find.
It's definitely rare.
Extremely rare. We celebrate guys like Joe Calzaghe for retiring undefeated, or Floyd Mayweather for his 0, but Pongsaklek fought more often and held his title longer than almost anyone in contemporary boxing. He made 17 consecutive defenses of the lineal and WBC flyweight titles. And just to clarify for the listener, when we say lineal, we mean the man who beat the man, the true championship lineage. In doing so, he broke the record of Miguel Canto, who had 14 defenses.
Right, the Mexican legend.
Exactly. Canto is universally regarded as one of the greatest flyweights of all time. He's a Hall of Famer, unquestioned. So logically, if Canto is in with 14 defenses, how do you justify keeping out the man who eclipsed him with 17? When you look at streaks like that, 56 wins in a row, you are in the company of Carlos Monzon and Julio Cesar Chavez. That is the pantheon. To deny him entry based on subjective bias is to deny the history of the division itself.
Well, that is a compelling argument, but I think you're leaning way too hard on the spreadsheet here.
How so?
Because the sheer volume of his record is actually a double-edged sword. I just don't buy that the number 17 is enough on its own. If those 17 defenses were against nobodies, the number is completely hollow.
But they weren't.
I know that, and you know that. But the casual Western observer, and frankly, a lot of the voters, they look at a record of 91 wins, 5 losses, and 2 draws, and they see a lot of stay-busy fights in Thailand against debutants or local journeymen. He had a lot of non-title bouts that were essentially glorified exhibitions.
Which is incredibly common in Thai boxing culture. You stay active.
It is, but it clouds the water. It gives the detractors an easy out. My position is that you have to strip away that padding to find the diamond. The case for Pongsaklek isn't that he won often, is that when the bell rang for a real fight against a real champion, he was an absolute assassin. He beat 11 former, current, or future world champions. He didn't just defend the belt. He dismantled guys like Daisuke Naito and Koki Kameda on their home soil. The context of who he beat is far more impressive and far more vital to his Hall of Fame pace than just how many times his hand was raised.
I think we are arriving at the first core disagreement here, which is the quality of that resume. You mentioned the padding argument, which is the favorite stick his critics love to beat him with. They say, oh, he fought guys with losing records in between title fights.
Which he absolutely did. It's undeniable.
He did. But I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning as a tool for exclusion, because as you noted, every great fighter from that region stays active. If you look at the hit list, the actual title fights, it destroys the narrative that he was a protected fighter. Let's talk about Daisuke Naito.
A great place to start. Naito was a legitimate world-class fighter, a massive Japanese superstar.
He was his greatest rival. They fought 3 times during the first reign. And what happened in their second fight? Pongsaklek knocked him out in 34 seconds.
Yeah.
That is the fastest knockout in flyweight title history. 1 punch. That isn't padding. That is high-level execution against the man who would go on to be a world champion.
It's iconic. It was a masterpiece of southpaw timing. Naito dipped to throw an uppercut, and Pongsaklek came over the top with a straight left that looked like it was fired from a cannon. Naito was unconscious before he hit the canvas.
Precisely. And look at the other names. Luis Lazarte.
Oh, Lazarte was a nightmare to fight.
Right, a tough, rugged Argentine who went on to become a world champion at 108 pounds. He was known for being dirty, hard to look good against. Pongsaklek stopped him in 2 rounds. He didn't just edge past him, he blew him out.
And that is rare. Lazarte was a survivor. To blow him out in 2 rounds shows a level of offensive firepower that people forget Pongsaklek had. They think of him as a pure technician, but the man could crack. So I grant you, the A side of his resume is elite. But I want to play devil's advocate here regarding the names that aren't on the resume.
I assume you mean the other stars of the era.
Yes, because this is the biggest knock on Pongsaklek, and the reason I think voters hesitate. It's the what-if factor. During his reign, we saw the rise of Victor Chinyan, Nonito Donaire, Omar Narvaez. These were the other kings of the lower weight classes, and Pongsaklek fought exactly none of them.
That is a fair critique, but we have to look at why those fights didn't happen.
I agree, but the critics say he stayed in his comfort zone in Thailand and actively avoided the unification bouts.
That's a really interesting point, though. I would frame it entirely differently. It wasn't avoidance, it was the reality of boxing economics in the 2000s. The flyweight division was completely fractured. You had Narvaez holding the WBO belt hostage in Argentina for 16 defenses. He never left.
Never left home.
Exactly.
Right. So why is Pongsaklek the one penalized for not traveling to Argentina when Narvaez wouldn't travel to Thailand? And the promoters had zero incentive to cross the street.
Exactly. Why would an American promoter pay to bring a Thai legend over to fight a guy like Darchinyan when the money just wasn't there? HBO wasn't buying flyweight fights back then. But Pongsaklek did travel. This is where your home fighter myth completely falls apart.
I'm with you there. He fought in Japan 8 times in title fights. And Japan is not neutral ground for a Thai fighter. That is enemy territory. It is arguably the most hostile environment for a visiting fighter outside of maybe Mexico. And he went there and won repeatedly.
He fought Naito 3 times in Japan. He fought Hidenobu Honda in Japan. He fought Tomonobu Shimizu in Japan.
And that Shimizu fight was a masterclass. Shimizu was tall, rangy, a future champion. Pongsaklek broke him down and stopped him in 7 rounds. If you can go to Tokyo and knock out the local hero, you are not a protected fighter.
But if we are talking about traveling and winning, we have to talk about the second reign. This, to me, is actually the strongest argument for his greatness, even more than the 17 consecutive defenses.
The resurrection.
The resurrection. Because look, he lost the title to Naito in 2007. The incredible streak was over. He was 30 years old, which is ancient for a flyweight, and the lower weights, speed goes first. Most people thought, okay, great run, Hall of very good, but he's done.
And he didn't get an immediate rematch for the title. He really had to work his way back.
He had to grind for 2 solid years. And then in 2010, he gets a shot at the WBC belt again. But who does he have to fight? Koki Kameda.
We really need to explain Koki Kameda to the listeners who might not follow Japanese boxing. In 2010, Koki Kameda was the Justin Bieber of Japan, if Justin Bieber could knock you out. He was a massive cultural phenomenon, young, brash, undefeated, 22-0. He had already held a title at light flyweight. The fight was in Tokyo. The entire Japanese boxing machine was behind him.
The script was absolutely written for Kameda to beat the old lion and torch past the era.
and Pongsaklek burned the script.
He went into Tokyo and put on a technical clinic. He was 32 years old, giving up height, giving up youth, and he beat Kameda to the punch all night. He used that veteran savvy, the distance control, the subtle movement. He won a majority decision, but most neutral observers felt it was much wider than that.
I actually rewatched that fight recently. What struck me was Pongsaklek's composure. The crowd was screaming for Kameda. Every time Kameda even threw a flurry, the arena shook. But Pongsaklek never blinked. He just popped that southpaw jab, pivoted, and countered. To regain the lineal championship, to start a second reign 3 years after losing it against a prime killer like Kameda, that is what separates the good champions from the Hall of Fame legends.
It's the difference between having a prime and having a career. That win over Kameda cemented his legacy because it proved the first reign wasn't just about favorable matchmaking. He beat the future of the division. And let's not forget, he defended that second title 4 times.
Including a win over Suryan Sor Rungvisai, who went on to be an absolute monster at super flyweight.
Exactly. But to be fair to the whole picture, we have to address the end of his career because I think it unfairly colors people's memories. He eventually lost to Sonny Boy Jaro in 2012.
A brutal loss. 6th round knockout.
It was a shocker.
It was named Upset of the Year by Boxing Scene. But I would argue that the fact it was Upset of the Year actually strengthens his Hall of Fame case.
How so?
Because Pongsaklek was 34 years old. He had nearly 90 fights on his odometer, and yet he was still so highly regarded, still ranked in the top 10 pound for pound by Ring magazine, that losing to a solid puncher like Jaro was considered a massive, earth-shattering upset. That tells you how high his stock was, even in his twilight.
That's a really fair assessment. If he had been seen as just a washed-up veteran hanging on, nobody would have called it an upset. They would have just called it the end. He was ranked pound for pound in 2006, dropped out, and then climbed back in 2010 after the Kameda fight. Ring magazine had him right there alongside guys like Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather.
So we have a guy who was top 10 pound for pound in 2 different decades, ruled the division for a total of 12 years, essentially, and beat 11 world champions. So why are we even having this debate? Why isn't he in Canastora?
Well, now we get to the ugly part of the conversation, the systemic bias.
It is the elephant in the room, and it's wearing a Made in USA hat.
The International Boxing Hall of Fame electorate is heavily comprised of American boxing writers, and historically, if a fight didn't happen on HBO or Showtime, or at least in Las Vegas or Atlantic City, it didn't happen.
It's the out of sight, out of mind syndrome, and it hits the lower weight classes the absolute hardest. If you are a heavyweight, the world watches. If you are a flyweight fighting at Bangkok or Tokyo, you need to be undeniable just to get noticed.
And even being undeniable isn't always enough. Look at the comparison to Vinny Pazienza.
Oh, please don't get me started on Vinny Paz.
Vinny Pazienza was inducted recently. Great story, obviously, the broken neck comeback, the movie with Miles Teller. I get the fame aspect of it, but look at the resume. He was 2-6 in world title fights, 2 wins, 6 losses.
And never made a successful defense of his super welterweight title, not one.
Meanwhile, Pongsaklek Wonjongkam was 22-2-2 in major title fights, 22 wins in world title bouts versus 2, yet Pazienza gets in and Wonjongkam waits.
It's a structural failure of the Hall. They are prioritizing narrative and American familiarity over actual sporting achievement. And it's not just Pongsaklek. Look at Gilberto Roman. Look at Pon Kingpech.
Kingpech is a tragic omission. Thailand's first world champion. He beat Pascual Perez, an all-time great, twice. He beat Fighting Harada. These are legends. And Kingpech isn't in?
It almost feels like there is a quota system for Asian fighters. Like, oh, we let in Kaosai Galaxy, so we're good on Thailand for a while.
Which is absurd. It's like saying, well, we have Ali, so we don't need Larry Holmes. Pongsaklek paid sanctioning fees for 30 WBC title fights. He was the face of the WBC flyweight division for a generation. If the Hall of Fame is supposed to record the history of the sport, you simply cannot tell the story of the 112-pound division in the 21st century without Pongsaklek Wonjongkam.
You really can't. And I think the voters are slowly starting to wake up, but the backlog is dangerous. Every year he stays out, his name fades a little more for the voters who never saw him live.
And that is exactly why we have to look at the cold, hard facts. You mentioned earlier that numbers lie.
But in this case, do they?
No. In this case, the numbers are the headline, but the film is the article. The numbers say dominant, but the film says master.
He was a southpaw with a beautiful jab, incredible distance management, and legitimate one-punch power in the left hand. He wasn't just winning decisions, he was outclassing people.
And he was durable. He took a lot of punches in 90 fights, but was only stopped twice. Once when he was completely green, and once when he was old. In his prime, his chin was iron.
I want to circle back to one statistic that I think sums it all up. Between 2001 and 12, there were many flyweight champions. We listed them earlier: Donaire, Darchinyan, Narvaez, Lorenzo Parra. But only one man was a lineal champion for the vast majority of that time.
Pongsaklek.
He held the lineage. He was the man who beat the man, and he defended that distinction 17 times in his first reign. I am just not convinced by any argument that places fame or Western television exposure over that level of competitive consistency.
I agree. And frankly, the argument that he missed the other greats is totally weak when you realize that none of those other greats fought each other at flyweight. Either. Donaire didn't fight Darchinyan at 112. They fought at 115. Narvaez stayed in his lane in Argentina. Pongsaklek stayed in his lane. He just happened to drive his car further and much longer than anyone else.
That's a great way to put it. He was the constant. The variable was everyone else.
And let's give credit to the quality wins one more time. Beating Edgar Sosa in 2011, Sosa was a long-reigning champion at 108 pounds. He came up, he was the mandatory, he was highly ranked, and Pongsaklek at age 34 won a unanimous decision. He didn't just beat the guys coming up, he beat the established veterans too.
Beating Sosa, beating Kameda, beating Naito, beating Tunakawa, these are 4 distinct chapters of a career. Most fighters are lucky to have one defining chapter. Pongsaklek had 4.
And yet we sit here debating his case.
We do, but I think the tide is slowly turning. As we get more distance from his era, the padding arguments fade, and the 17 defenses record stands like a monument.
It's the Miguel Canto effect. Canto wasn't appreciated fully in his time because he was a defensive wizard who fought primarily in Mexico. Now, he's revered. Pongsaklek is the modern Canto.
As we wrap this up, let's summarize our positions in light of the discussion. For me, Pongsaklek Wonjongkam is an automatic induction based on historical precedent. You cannot exclude the man who broke the all-time division record for title defenses. If the numbers matter, and in sports they must, he is a Hall of Famer.
And for me, even if you throw the record book entirely out the window, he gets in on the eye test and the strength of his best nights. He went into hostile territory in Japan and beat the best they had to offer, repeatedly. He regained the title against a younger superstar. He was a complete fighter who fell victim to Western bias, but his quality is undeniable.
So the question remains, is a Hall of Fame career defined by undeniable statistical dominance or by the contextual quality of a fighter's hardest nights in hostile territory? That is for you to decide. But reflecting on this, whether you look at the 90-plus wins or the hit list of 11 champions defeated, there is clearly so much more to explore in the history of the lower weight classes.
Absolutely. We are looking at a master technician who ruled his weight class for a decade. The delay in his induction is an indictment of the voting process, not the fighter.
On that, we are in total agreement. Thank you for listening to the debate.
See you next time.